Share screen. We practiced this earlier on so that we're confident that it's going to work. And there we go. We're going to share. And then we'll just make the thingy go shut and then take PowerPoint. Yeah, and so as I said, feel free to, there'll be plenty of time for questions and stuff at the end, but feel free to ask questions and the like, to make contributions. So I wanted to talk in this first session to look at photography and working with digital images. I'm part of the Open Virtual Worlds group at the University of St Andrews, and we do a lot of work on making digital reconstructions, on making digital galleries, doing virtual tours, just playing around and investigating how digital technologies can be used in the preservation and in the promotion of heritage. And we've been doing that for maybe about 12 years or so, starting off doing reconstruction of a basilica in Greece and St Andrew's Cathedral. Great subjects for that. So that's some of the work that we've done, and we had the pleasure as part of a EU project doing workshops around the globe on 3D digitization and on spherical media. But we thought we would start this series of workshops looking at photography and looking at digital images. Now we know that photography has been around for a while, and working with digital images has been around for a while, but it is a key way. You know, somebody once said, and I'm sorry I haven't got the but you know, an image is worth 1,000 words, and so being able to put a good image in front of somebody is a great way of communicating heritage. And one of the things about, you know, today is that there are you all have cameras on your pockets and with you in terms of mobile phones. So it is a skill that everybody engages in and engages with, and so it is immensely accessible. And so what I want to talk about is this list of things here today to cover. So a bit about communicating heritage with images. If you'll indulge me, a little bit on digitization, images and perception, which is some of the sort of background to the domain that we're working in here. And then we'll talk about shooting an image, how to go about taking a photograph effectively, and what are the issues to think about with respect to that. And then we'll look at post-processing. So once we've taken a photograph, what do we do with that photograph to put it into the best possible shape for ourselves? A little bit on public domain and intellectual property. So that's like where we can source images from, where we can put images to, and how and if we want to protect images that we take, and think about the intellectual property rights over them, or think about how we might want to share them in a controlled way. And then a bit about social media and sharing, and a bit about equipment, software and resources. So that's the plan. I'm hoping that kind of aligns with what you were expecting, or maybe it's more than, maybe it's slightly different. I'm not sure. So there we go. So communicating with images, and it's, you know, to be said that there are lots of examples of the way in which we can share images and the way in which we can use images. So once we have a photograph, we can use it in email. We can drop it into instant messaging. These days, pretty much any Facebook post will have an image associated with it, or at least associating an image with a Facebook post greatly increases the likelihood that somebody will see it, or that somebody will interact with it, or somebody that will share it. But also, as well as social media, images are really important for web pages. Google Maps and Maps are a great venue for getting audiences to connect with us, and also we can use on Wikipedia and Wikimedia. So there's lots of different places which images can be used, and one of the things that I think is worth thinking about is how images can be archived, so that you don't just take an image, take a photograph for an email, or take a photograph for a social media post, but that when we take photographs, there is some level in which they are organized, they are put into a safe place, so that they can then be used and reused in multiple different contexts. And part of that involves associating descriptions with the images, giving them a title, a description, and maybe associating other metadata with them. So there's lots of different ways in which we can use images, and it's given that that's the case, if we're wanting to reuse them, then it's worth thinking about things like having an archive, and it's worth thinking about metadata describing those images. So this is an example of Dumbarton Castle. Is there anybody here from Dumbarton? Oh, well. But this is taken from Google Maps. So what this is showing is a photograph that's been taken by somebody and has put it onto Google Maps. And I suppose that one of the things that's worth mentioning there is with Google Maps is that so many people use it. I mean, I would use it whenever I go somewhere to get the directions and lay of the land and all of that sort of thing. So by putting images in there, which anybody can do, by the way, then you're controlling or having an influence over the way in which people perceive your heritage, or the heritage that you're interested in or associated with, when they could come into somewhere like Google Maps. So this is another great resource that a lot of you, I'm sure, will know about, but CAMMore, which is run by Historic Environment Scotland, is both a great resource for finding images of heritage places and descriptions of those places. So CAMMore makes great use of images and is a really valuable resource for Scotland. So this is an example of a blog, 10 stunning lighthouses to visit and stay. So although a blog, it is essentially telling a story, it's about words. This is about 2020 coasts and waters, but you can see there a stunning image lighting up that blog. And Wikimedia Commons, again, this is somewhere that is a great source or a great resource for images, and all the ones that are in there are available for use and are available for reuse. So it certainly is something that I would often look towards if I'm wanting images to do with a particular topic or a particular place. But it's also somewhere where we can put images if we're wanting people to be able to make use of, or to put up digital representations of heritage. So there, Wikimedia Commons, if you wanted to find images that are in the public domain, or a place to put images if you're wanting to put them into the public domain, and of course social media. So this is an image here from our work that we did with the West Highland Museum, or that the West Highland Museum did, and we gave a hand to. and it's usually here we're using images of people in order to advertise an online event, and on the right hand side the same event, but we're seeing the different galleries that were being represented in that, and the different heritage objects that were being represented in that, and advertising through Instagram and the like. So that was a somewhat eclectic tour of some of the ways in which images can be used for heritage. I'm sure that you would all have lots of examples or lots of resources that you know about, and please do feel free to share those. So if there are any great repositories of images for people to either pull them out and to use them, or to put them in so that other people can use them, then it would be great if you could feel free to hit the button and say something to everybody here, or to just type something into the chat. Either would be great, but I think it would be lovely to hear from any of you about any ideas for examples of great use of images or great resources that are circulating. We'll save the chat at the end so that we kind of like pick up any information and share it with you guys. So that would be great. Okay, so digitization, images, and perception. So I don't want to go on a lot about this, but I do think it's worth kind of understanding or thinking about how images work in the digital domain. Oh, I see what I've done there. So when we digitize something, and I think that this is going to be true when we're talking about audio, and when we're talking about video and virtual tours and the like, there are advantages and there are disadvantages. So when something is digitized, we make it easy to copy. We make it easy to move, and we make it easy to change. So once we take a photograph, I can make lots of copies of it and send it to lots of my friends, or I can put it up somewhere and people can make a copy by downloading it and then use it in their own way. So this is a fundamental property of digitization. We're making it easy to copy. Second, it's easy to move, so that, whereas an artifact, I have to go to the museum and go into the museum, see the artifact in order to interact with it in any way. Once I've taken a photograph of that, that photograph can be accessed. I put it on the internet, it can be accessed from anywhere on the globe, and consequently, it's easy to move. It travels at the speed of light, or 2/3 of the speed of light, or something like that, moving around. And then also, once we've got a digital copy, we can edit it. We can cut bits out, we can copy bits and paste them in, paste them over each other. We can turn a color photograph into a black and white photograph. There's a really famous photograph of Lenin from the Russian Revolution making a speech, and stood next to him is Trotsky. And, Stalin got rid of Trotsky, and after Lenin took over after Lenin. And literally in that photograph, he painted out Trotsky. And this was really, famous thing, because, people thought, oh, photographs is, it's not like a painting. You can't embellish the truth with a photograph. It is telling the truth, but actually you could manipulate them, but it's a really difficult thing to do. That's why it was famous. It was an unusual thing to happen. But now that we work with photographs in the digital domain, they're not unalterable. They're obviously easy to change. We can change their color, we can change the perspective. There's lots of things that we can do to change them. I mean, we could even make them come to life and have movement and the like, not just in Harry Potter, but with iPhones as well. So advantages are, and it may seem that all those things may seem really obvious, but they're also really fundamental. And so they're worth kind of sort of bearing in. Disadvantages. Anything in digital domain is inaccurate. Okay, so analog, it can be infinitely accurate. Once we make something digital, we're storing information in finite bunches and in finite blocks, and that means there's some rounding takes place. There's some loss of accuracy in moving from the analog domain to the digital domain. It requires learning. We have to learn how to do it. And we need to go through the process of digitization, even if that's only kind of taking a photograph. So there's advantages and there's disadvantages and there's fundamental challenges. Size is a challenge, storage is a challenge, and playback is a challenge. Now, not so much for an individual photograph, right? There are a few megabytes in size. But you know, an HD stream of video takes up a huge amount of space. You're talking about gigabits per second if it's uncompressed. And I know people probably can watch 4K films streamed from Netflix on their devices, or at least HD films streamed on Netflix, but you can't. It won't work. Because of the size is too big to fit down those pipes. So the thing that makes it work is compression. So images, film, video, all of this stuff needs to be compressed. And what compression does is what it tries to do is to throw away the stuff that we can't perceive, throw that information away. So, for example, we can't hear stuff above about 20 kilohertz. So we can throw away frequencies above that. Human acuity is limited, so that's why we can make screens that are made up of dots but look like smooth things, because we can't acuity. We are limited in terms of the accuracy which we can see things in the distance. And so what compression does is it takes advantage of the limitations in our perception in order to be able to turn high definition stream or high definition photographs into things which can be stored, transmitted, and the like. So these are the properties. And one of the reasons why that's important to kind of like know is that it means that some things can get better. So like the whole virtual reality thing, our perception of it can be greatly improved as computers become more powerful, as computers become more powerful, as images become higher resolution and like. So that we are kind of on a journey, traveling through the digital domains, traveling through the digital representation of heritage. And that journey is going to continue to change for decades as the cost of the devices that we use for a given level of functionality comes down, and as the capability of those devices goes up, and as the digital literacies that are associated with these technologies become more pervasive in society. And for heritage, that's important because it means that there can be growing expectation about technical competence of audiences coming into museums and heritage organizations, and expectations about the cost of digital technologies coming down, and about the capabilities going up. So we're not in a static situation or a static scenario. And I think that means these things are all worthwhile looking at, with the view that they're going to become more pervasive and more useful in the future. So it's a journey that's worth participating in. So that, I think, is really what I wanted to say about the images, digitization of images and the like. I mean, JPEG is the main format for digitization, for compression, and it's shared, but the compression algorithms that are used in JPEG are shared by other systems. They're shared by movies, MPEGs, and the like. But so, yeah, so digitization, images, and perception. I think it's a sort of message of hope for the future, but also a message of challenges that are sort of unfinished and will continue to rise. So I don't know. Again, I mean, encourage. I can't actually see the chat because I've got so much going on here, but I can. So it would be, yeah, if anybody had any comments they wanted to make on that, predictions for the future, in the digital domains, or views on digitization and the fundamentals of digitization and the like. But if not, we can carry on. And this I suppose is the sort of the meat of the issue.
Hello, Alan.
Hello.
Hello. Sorry, it was just a few things. George McLaughlin, by the way.
Hi, George. Nice to meet you. Where are you from, George?
Untitled Heritage Trust.
Lovely. So you'll know David Caldwell. I think he hails from your parts.
That's right. He's on our committee. What I was saying, we have started in the past 2 years digitizing we have a huge photo collection, but we have started making movies. We opened a YouTube channel. But the problem is we use our own computers, our own home computers. And when you start doing high definition film, anything more than 15, 20 minutes, the computers can't deal with it. You know, unless you have a top end computer. We are finding that you know, we're quite experimental with the way that we do these things, but we find that the equipment that we use, which we're all a voluntary organization, and it's mainly our own equipment, that holds us back a lot. That we're looking around just now for methods of funding that, and we could perhaps buy better equipment to deal with the digital age, basically. Sorry, that's all I was saying. It was just I agreed with you when you said that it takes up an awful lot of storage.
Yes. Thanks a lot for that, George. That's really really helpful. And I think that I think you're on a good course in terms of looking for funding. I mean, I think particularly if you can say, look, these are the things that that we've been doing, but you know, a computer which is capable of handling video and the like shouldn't, a new one should be sort of £500 to £1,000, which I understand can be a lot of money for a heritage society, heritage organisation. But you know, 10 years ago, to get something that would have the same capability, you'd maybe be talking about 5, 10, or 20,000, which would mean that it was really working with these sorts of technologies was almost kind of sort of out of reach, or a lot less easy to work with. I would say though that you know, in terms of videos, often the most impactful ones can be really quite short. You know, 30 seconds or a minute, or 5 minutes. So sometimes Maybe the limiting to 15 minutes is not the end. It's not the end of the world. Also, the people's phones, I think, are increasingly more capable of taking high quality videos and processing them. But yeah, I think we found also when we were working with 3D stuff that taking the photographs wasn't so bad, but doing the processing to make models out of them was more difficult. So I can see that is a challenge for you and for us all. Okay, great. Yeah, so thanks a lot for that, George. And I'm hoping that maybe you could put a link into the chat to show off one of your videos on your YouTube channel.
Yeah, I can do that. Yep,
you could do that. That would be great, and I'd be interested in having a look at that, and I'm sure others would as well. But so it all starts. Oh, where did that come from? It all starts with. Can you still see my screen? Yes. Yes. It all starts with shooting an image, and in terms of that, we need to think about these 7 things. So equipment. What equipment do we have accessible? What equipment do we want? We can spend a fortune on equipment, and you know, it's that can be a fun thing to do, and you know, it's nice to have access to really great cameras and the like. But you know, the best camera anyone know what the best camera in the world is?
It used to be a Hasselblad.
Sorry?
It used to be a Hasselblad.
Yeah. But somebody else gave a different type of answer, I'm sure.
The one that's in your hand, ready to use.
Yeah, I think that I'm sorry, it was a kind of trick question, but I think that's true. You know, it's that if you have a camera with you, that's the best one, because that's the one you could take a photograph with. All the other cameras in the world are of no use to you at all. And it's interesting, actually. Who is the guy? There's a famous photographer who used to be in these adverts for Olympus Trip cameras. Got like 35mm camera from the.
David Bailey, was it?
Yeah, that's it, Bailey. So he's kind of using this camera, and then there's somebody with a really complicated one with all the bells and the whistles going on. That guy, he can't take him seriously, not with the camera that he's using. But actually, it's Olympus Trip 35, an excellent camera for the time, and I think that used well, the cameras that we have access to can make a great thing. You know, lots of people use the same paintbrushes as Leonardo da Vinci, but there's only one Leonardo da Vinci who did the Mona Lisa. So it's you know, it's important to get the equipment right, but it's not the be all and end all. So equipment, and then camera setup. How to set a camera up. We'll look at some question about wide angles, lenses, try to get the best, how we can get the best out of light, how we can compose photographs, how we can minimize perspective, and then some other stuff on photograph details. So equipment, first of all, camera and phone. So this is a thing that I can recommend. If you're using your phone, it should cost about £1.50 from Amazon. It might cost £5, but it's a clicker. So what this means is that you can take a photograph without touching your phone. Okay, and that's a great thing, because when you touch the phone, or when you touch your camera to take the photograph, it introduces a wobble. It makes it wobble. So, and when it wobbles, it may make it less photograph less clear. So, and you see here with the, you can get these little grips that you've got the phone being held onto. So that lets you put your phone onto a tripod. So then you've got your Amazon Basics tripod, £15, your New Air thing, for holding the phone at £5, and you've got this thing for a £5. So for about £20–25, you've turned your phone into something that you can use for kind of selfies, into something that you can hold steady, you can zoom in, you can zoom out, and you can do low light photography with, as well as light photography. So I think it is a great idea. At the moment, you know, phones are differentiating from each other on the quality of their cameras. I've got this phone, Huawei P30. It's got like 3 different cameras on it, all of which are 3 different lenses on it, all of which are pretty good. So I'd be confident in using that for photography. Don't get me wrong, if you've got a standalone camera, that's great as well, and you can use that as well. But I think that we all really now have access to good quality cameras, whether they be on our phones or whether we've spent £100 to £500 on buying a camera. The ones that we use are the Sony mirrorless ones that are pretty good. Pretty good range, which enables you to have different sorts of lenses in it. But what you do want to do is to be able to have some access to manual controls. Okay, and if we're going to use it on the internet, for images on the internet, you don't need a resolution greater than 2 megapixels. 4K is 8 megapixels. So obviously, if you're going to be making posters and the like with your images, then you need much higher resolutions. But and any phone is going to get you a resolution for doing internet and image working and so on. So yes. Camera phone, manual controls. Here's a clicker. We want to have a tripod mount, a memory box. Lighting can be important, but if we're photographing buildings, and I think that for digital open doors, often it's going to be wanting to photograph a building from outside or take multiple photographs of buildings from outside. We have to almost indefinitely rely upon the natural light rather than introducing artificial lighting. So we're stood outside, we've got a subject. How do we set the camera up? And there's these 4 things, there's these 4 concepts that I think are worthwhile, even if we're using automatic settings on the camera and we let the camera set itself up automatically, which a lot of the time is a sensible thing to do. It's in extraordinary circumstances where we need to use the manual settings. But if we want to understand what's happening with a camera, these 4 things: exposure, size of aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. Okay, so the exposure idea is the amount of light per unit of area which is reaching a photographic surface. Okay, and so we want the right amount of light to reach the photographic surface so that the image that we make is one that we can see properly with the human eye. It's not blown out too light, and it's not so dark that we can't see the details. It's between these 2 things, and we can achieve that by adjusting the size of the aperture or the F number. So when the F number is high, we have a small aperture. And when the F number is low, we have when the F number is low, we have a wide aperture. So if you're looking at a lens, or if you're looking at a camera, it might say f2.0 or f1.2 or something. Okay, so that number is small. That means the aperture is wide open. Okay, or we might set the aperture to a different number. We might set the aperture to f16. So that means that the aperture is small. Okay, there's not much light that's coming through it. Now, if the aperture is wide, that means that the depth of field, the area that is in focus, is narrow. Okay, so if you're taking a photograph of a person and you want a nice blurry background, then you want to set the aperture to be wide open. Okay, so that just some of it is in focus and then the background is out of focus. Okay. If the aperture is small, then much more is in focus. And actually, if you're ever stuck without your glasses at a railway station, if you put your hand like that and look through the hole like that, because you've got a small hole, everything will be in focus, so you'll be able to see what time the train is, if we were allowed to go onto trains, or if it was safe to go onto trains. So high F number, much more stuff is in focus. And actually, if we're photographing a building, we probably want to have a high F number because we want to have a lot of it in focus. And generally for heritage stuff, you know, we're not that concerned about the fuzzy backgrounds. We want as much as possible in focus. So we'll have small F numbers. So the size of, high F numbers with the size of the aperture being narrow. That means the shutter speed, so that's the amount of time that the shutter is open. So is it like 1,000th of a second, 100th of a second, or 1/10th of a second, 1 second, 10 seconds? How long it is open for. If the hole is small, it has to be open for a longer period of time. Okay, so we keep the shutter speed up at a higher number, and this means that we can still get the right exposure despite the fact that our aperture number is small. Okay, and then the ISO number comes from the days when we had film in our cameras, and you'd put in an ISO with a small number on it, like 100 or 50. We'd put that into our camera on bright sunny days, and then when it was cloudy or dark, we'd put one in at 400 or 800. Now these days they go up to 128,000, and this lets us do photography in the dark. It lets us do photography in low light conditions, but there's a price to pay. The higher the ISO number we use, generally the more fuzzy the picture is. So we want to keep the ISO number small. Okay, so because we want to keep the ISO number small as possible, we want to keep the aperture small as possible, we need to have a high shutter speed. A low shutter speed, shutter stays open for a long time. The problem with that is any shake. Any shake is going to blur the picture. So if you've got a shutter speed of 1/2000th of a second, right, then your camera's not going to move much in that 1/2000th of a second. Even if you're kind of waving it around, you're still going to get a clear picture. But if you're waving it around and the shutter speed is 1 second or 1/10th of a second, there's going to be a huge amount of blur. So we need to make the photograph stable. So for that, we need to have a tripod. Now, all of these things are good for setting up the camera. It's good to understand for setting up the camera. We don't need to spend £1,000 on a tripod. You can spend £15 on a tripod from Amazon to photograph the frontage of a building using your mobile phone, set it up right, get a high quality photograph out of that without investing a huge amount of money in equipment. It is accessible to do this. But lenses, if we wanted to do a landscape, Then we want to have a wide angled lens. If we're wanting to do a portrait of a person, or pick out details, then maybe we have a telephoto lens. If you've got a camera, maybe you can switch between wide angle and telephoto by swapping lenses in or changing the settings on the lens, or by using the zoom on your mobile phone. Or actually, this mobile phone has three lenses. So it has a wide angle lens, a standard lens, and a telephoto lens, and it can switch between those. And it's not a posh phone by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah, so 18mm or less for landscape, 50mm or more for telephoto, and on a full frame camera, so that'd be 28mm telephoto and 28mm for wide angle and 70mm for telephoto. Okay, and there's a link there where we'll put up all of these slides so that you can click on the links that are involved in them to read more about lenses. Lenses are great things. I collect them. Yeah, eBay, you can pick them up for not much money, and if you want to play around with physical cameras, then that's great. But there you go. So lenses, and this is a tent. So if we are photographing objects, it's you can get one of these tents again from Amazon New Air or something like that. It's £20, £30, £40, and it just lets you control the light and the background if you're photographing objects. Obviously, photographing buildings, it's not a tremendous amount of use. And so there's an example of a tent in use. And then the light. So I think that the understanding light and making use of natural light to the best is a key to making photographs that are of great quality. So we need to rely on sunlight for architecture and landscapes. And you need to understand how the building is lit at different times of the day. So that might mean, for example, spending a whole day photographing a building, photographing it in the morning, at lunchtime and in the evening, because different faces will be lit well at different times of the day, depending upon where the sun is and how it is relating to the building. And of course, different cloud formations and so on will mean that the light is different, not just because of the time of day, but on different days. And so this poses real challenges in terms of reliability, but also great opportunities in terms of creating unique photographs. And so you need to combine together some understanding of kind of the physics of light and direction and all that sort of thing, with a huge amount of patience. With the best photographers might go and camp out and just wait for a day, a week, or longer to get the right conditions to take the perfect photograph. So this, if there's a building that you love, then it can be a thing which is a lifetime, taking photographs of the same object, taking photographs of the same building at different times of day under different lighting conditions, and that can be great for building up galleries. Also, you can take photographs, once every 2 seconds, and that will show clouds moving and the skies changing and all of the environment changing around the focus of what you are photographing. So we can take into account weather, clouds, and the whole process of photographing this. It's once you've kind of got the technical thing and you've got your camera and you've got it set up, it can be a really exciting process, particularly when you get the the killer photograph and so on. So it's something that's really worth getting into. Early morning and evening often has a softer, less harsh light. And so that they're good times to be out. And sad to say, early morning at the moment really is early. It's like, it's what is it, like 4 o'clock in the morning or something like that you're getting out. But the light in Scotland in summer is fabulous. You know, at night and, you know, late at night and early in the morning, you know, we have such extended mornings and such extended evenings that there can be some really breathtaking light in order that will bring out the best of your subject. So yeah, and you can turn it into a sort of it doesn't have to be a laborious process. You know, it can be married in with you know, picnics and music and possibly even, you know, the odd dram of whiskey if it's appropriate for the subject that you're photographing. So it can be a fun process. But if you want to get the best, then you need patience. It's no good thinking, I will take this photograph at 5 o'clock and then I will go on to somewhere else and I'll take that one at 7 and I'll take that one at 8. That may, I say it's no good. You may get a series of photographs, but if you want to get something that is fantastic, then patience, I think, is the key to it, and looking at the light and thinking about the light. But as well as light, composition is important.
Alan, I'm just going to jump in briefly because I've just put a note in the chat as well about how with Doors Open Days, we find it lovely seeing pictures of buildings, but quite often we don't see pictures of people enjoying the building. So it's really nice to remember to kind of capture both together if you're sharing stuff about your Doors Open Days event, particularly if you're documenting an event that's happening or documenting people visiting your building, because I think for future people always want to see what's so lovely about your venue, what people love about going there, and it's really nice to see people enjoying something at a venue.
Yes, I think that's such a good point. It's good. It's good to see, and also, you know, I mean, you can just about see some people there, and it's a good job you can, because as well as you know, it's nice to see the heritage being used. It gives a sense of scale as well, doesn't it? Like you get an idea about what the size of the place is, which you wouldn't get otherwise. You need to be a little bit careful. It's good to get consent. I don't think it would matter in a photograph like that because you can't really pick out who they are. But you know, if you've got clear shots of people's faces, particularly if they're young people, then there may be some issues to do with consent. So we'll come on to this in later sessions, but we can get kind of forms for people to sign and the like, and that they're good to have on. They're good to have on file. But yes, I think it's good to hear that about the things that really kind of make a difference. So good to get people in. Composition, use a wide-angled lens, and so you can get the whole thing in, so you can provide context. And this is the second point, is photograph details as well. And I think that the details can be people, or make sure you got people in it, but also you know, the details in the window, or some carving, or just things that are exceptional. Take photographs of those so that you can then make a gallery, you know, a gallery which shows you what it looks like from the outside, but also zooms in on things. And it may not just be a gallery, you can actually make it, we can look at how we'll make a series of photographs into a video. So, I mean, it's really easy actually. You can just drop them into PowerPoint and press play and talk. And then you've got a video with a series of photographs merged into each other, and you talking over it. So it's a good idea to get the picture as a whole, but it's also a good idea to get photograph details. Sense of scale, so include something familiar. Here we've got some people, gives you an idea of the size of the house. consider using a panorama. So that's a nice idea. Most phones will come with that. You just move around and you can get a big panorama, big landscape. And it says experiment with lenses. So if you've got a camera that you can put different lenses in, that is so much fun. Putting in wide angle lenses, telephoto lenses, all of that stuff. And you can pick a lot of them up. Old manual lenses you can pick up cheap, or you get a zoom, but also you can zoom from your phone as well, which amounts to similar things. And I think that this is a good tip. Look for patterns and look for symmetry in the object that you are looking at. And then so perspective control is an important thing. So this shows you on the left, perspective controlled, on the right, perspective not controlled. Okay, things that are it's like the Father Ted thing. Do we have any fans of Father Ted? And Father Ted and Dougal with the cows, small, far away, small, far away. Well, if something's up in the air, it's going to be further away than something that is down low. And so that distorts the way in which we see it, okay? The human brain is fantastic, right, at correcting for this. It does it automatically. We don't see through our eyes, we don't see our brain, we don't see what we see, if you see what I mean. There's all sorts of veins and blood running across our eyes. There's a patch which is dark that you can't see. There's all sorts of things that our brain just filters those out, so we don't see them at all. It corrects for lots of things. It corrects for low light. You know, there's such a range of light and dark that we don't really pick up on when we're looking around, because our brain corrects for those things. And perspective is something that our brain corrects for. You have a set of straight things. We see them as being straight, but actually they are straight, but they don't appear straight. Our brain corrects for that. When you take a photograph, you're creating an image, but there's no brain correcting it for you. And that's why these two things we would see that cathedral as it is on the left, but actually the waves of light coming to us are as it is on the right. When we take a photograph, we get it as it is on the right. So we need to correct for that. We can correct for that in software, correct for perspective in software. So a program called GIMP, we can do it with that. Or we can use a tilt shift lenses, and they are expensive, but you can get cheaper ones. But I think that a lot of the time we're photographing buildings. So perspective is something that we need to think about it in order to get the best possible representations. And then detail. There's nothing like stating the obvious. So choose interesting details, keep the subject parallel to the lens, and consider black and white. Okay, because you're going to get the details nicely highlighted. Now, I know, like each of these things that I've kind of like mentioned here, we could have a whole workshop on any one of those topics, let alone trying to deal with them all in one section of one workshop. But I put a few links in there, and I'm hoping that you can go off and look at some more details, and at least by raising the main issues, there are things to be thinking about when going and taking photography. So that's kind of what I've got to say on the sort of taking the photograph process bit. And in the next bit, what I wanted to do was to move on and look at some post-processing and public domain and intellectual property. But I thought I could maybe pause there for a second, again, to see if, like Godsoul, people have any tips that they would like to contribute either into the chat or coming in and talking. That would be most welcome. And then I think if it's okay, we would maybe take a break for 5 or 10 minutes for people to catch a breath, maybe have a cup of tea, go and jump up and down and do all of that sort of stuff. But also, yeah.
Alan, there's a few people asking about sharing the presentation afterwards, and I'm just confirming that you're happy to do that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That would be fine. Yeah, it'd be fine to do that.
Great. And then there's been a few notes of different resources and sites that people have used. So I'm just noticing that mentions have been made of Canmore and Wikimedia Commons, Scran, Flickr, and HistoryPin.
That's great. It's great to hear that. Yeah, I have no excuse for not mentioning Scran in the presentation. HistoryPin, I'm not really familiar with. Who is recommending HistoryPin?
Yes,
do you want to speak up? Tell us a bit.
Yeah, the reason I said HistoryPin maybe was because, to be honest, it has been a while since I looked at it. But one of the projects we were involved with, that was a condition of it that the images went on there. But yeah, as I say, to be honest, I haven't looked at it for a while. But the idea was kind of just how it sounds, that you would pin historical items. I think they changed the structure of the site the last time I looked, so I can't honestly say too much about it. But yeah, I think that's you've got it up there now. You get the sort of general idea.
It looks great. I mean, the tagline, connecting communities with local history. I mean, that sounds like a great thing to do.
Yeah, I'm just not sure how much it's used. You know, I mean, the fact that you hadn't heard of it maybe says a lot. I don't know, but
I think it says more about me than to be honest with you.
But it's certainly, as I say, it's been a while since I looked at it, but it was certainly good for us at the time.
What was the project that you did there?
It was in connection with the Living Lomans Landscape project. We put together a historical trail, and there was an associated app as well. So points on the trail. In fact, if you search for Braes Lone trail.
Search for what, sorry?
Braes Lone, B-R-A-E-S, Lone. It should come up. Braes Lone Markinch or Braes Lone Trail.
Sorry, Braes, B-R-A-E-S.
L-O-A-N.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, it may just come under Markinch because it was, you know, as Markinch Heritage Group, so it may just come under Markinch, but unless they've taken it away, as I say, it's been a while since I've looked at the site, to be honest.
It's kind of strange because it's saying, yeah, it's saying.
Perhaps that could be our homework to go and investigate history.
Yeah, maybe. I'm sorry. I can't find it. But if anybody can find it and put a link in, then we'll go. But yeah, explore HistoryPin. So that's great. Yeah. So there's some interesting resources that have come up there.
Does anyone else have anything they want to raise? Oh, look, Julia's beat you to it, Alan. She's put a link to it, the Braes Lone project, in the chat.
Oh, that's great. Well done. Well, I can't even find my chat.
So shall we take a 5-10 minute break just now?
Yeah, I think so. I think if that's okay with everybody, take a bit of a break, and then we can come back and talk about some more comfort break. Oh, it would be great, actually. You know, if you have got projects that you've been involved with in the past that have got images, it would be great to stick those into the chat and share them with people, and we'll try and harvest them so that we can kind of like pull them together. And if you've not got you know, a whole project, actually a photograph would be perfect. You know, if you've got a nice photograph of a place, then stick that in the chat, and, or give us a link to it or something, and we can have a look at it. That would be lovely. Okay.
So should we ask everybody to, if you just keep on mute and turn your cameras off if you like, go and stretch and move your arms about and come back at 14:26. That gives you 10 minutes. Is that enough time? We'll see how many people have come back by that time and try and start again then. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you.
We must be extremely quick in going to the loo.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. That was a very speedy 10 minutes. I've only just managed to make a cup of tea, so I hope you all have too. Are you happy to join back in, Alan? I think we've got people starting to come back. You've got your water. Excellent. You're also on mute, Alan. Water and a biscuit. Excellent. That's what we all need.
I did manage to find the project I was talking about on History Pin. I'll put a link in the chat, so I hope that works. Strangely, I couldn't find it through Google. I had to go to History Pin and then search for our project. I don't know why I couldn't find it via Google, but hopefully that link will work, and it'll give you an idea how it works. You can see where the pins are on the map and so on, and the photographs associated with the project.
There it is. I don't know why I couldn't find it. That's really nice to see, yeah.
And Colin Cooper's also shared a nice project as well.
Hi, Colin.
But I think everybody can click on it. If it's too much, Alan, for you to be jumping between chat and your screen.
I can try. I don't know why though.
And also Colin Hunter from Talbot Castle.
There's the chat. There's the place. So that's from Neil. Bercy Earl's Palace. Oh, this is you, Colin, is it? Colin Cooper photography.
Yeah, sorry, I just didn't want to interrupt. But yeah, it's a, if you can hear me, it's just a couple of projects that I've done in collaboration with, obviously, Historic Environment Scotland, but with permission, so.
Oh, this is your aerial stuff.
Yeah, apologies, it's not photography, but if I can get away with a disclaimer that it's a series of photographs matched together to make a video.
Cool.
But I just thought, because it's historic, it's just the easiest things that I could get from an archive at the moment to share, if there's interest.
That's cool. No, it's great to see examples of, and aerial photography is something that's really come into it. And this is Talbot Castle. This is Colin Hunter. Hello, Colin. That's a huge castle.
Hi, Alan.
Hello, how you doing? So you've got the eastern entrance, tower house, and western entrance. It's pretty big, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And in fact, the only part that is really very obvious to the layman nowadays is the tower house. But it is possible to trace out the foundations of the rest of it, the outer bailey and the inner bailey, and indeed these drum towers at the top of the map. It must have been quite an impressive site at one stage. It was actually extended by King Robert during his reign, and it was one of his castles in the west.
Oh, cool. That's great. Target Castle. It looks like the sort of place that is crying out for a digital reconstruction, if I may say.
Yes, I agree. I've actually been experimenting with, well, the person who has kind of led the project, the conservation project there for the last, say, 10, 15 years, is actually a retired architect who has the benefit of being able to do some pretty good artist impressions, as it were. Also in terms of the kind of how it looks in the lands, how it would have looked in the landscape. I've done some experiments with Google Earth Pro, if you're familiar with that, and actually putting a structure, putting an imitation, as it were, of the structure into the 3D version of Google Earth Pro, which means you can then fly around, fly past it, that kind of thing.
That sounds great. I'd love to see that, actually.
I'll possibly see if I can, Alan, if I can send you maybe afterwards, I can maybe send you a very short screen grab video of the Google Earth Pro idea, just maybe a minute of it.
Yeah, that would be great. I'd love to see that. Rebecca, you've used Flickr. I think Flickr's a good resource. Yeah, checking. And then this is Jan, ambale.org.uk, Highland History and Culture Images. Oh yes, okay, I recognise it now with the logo. Yeah, this is great, and they have a fantastic presence on social media as well, don't they? Facebook. There's lots and lots of resources there, which are really really impressive.
Can I just say it's pronounced Umbalya?
Thank you very much. Umbalya. It's really good to get tips on pronunciations. Wherever I go in the world, I need that. I can't sing either. So, Laura Noakes. Now this is interesting that we're going to look at video later on, but this is a TikTok thing. I'm a great fan of TikTok. World War I Museum commemorating the 30,000 workers who worked at HM factory in Gretna, Devil's Porridge Museum. And these are all TikTok videos commemorating that. That is fascinating. Oh, Brock of Gurness. Let's have a look at Brock of Gurness. Oh, this is Colin again. Oh, that was really impressive, Colin, the Brock of Gurness. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut it off. You'll have to excuse my football things coming up. That's great. That's very good. I'm just wondering, is there right, you spent lots of time at Castle, Turbot Castle, history pin. I think that's most of the Joan, are you involved in Unveil? Or a fan, or a bit of both? Okay. So I'll maybe then move on to what I thought we could do is just do a little bit more on the presentation front. Afraid the presentation is taking a bit longer than I thought that it would do, but here we go. Because I think that it's great to take photographs, but then it's like, how do we use them and how do we process them? So if I just then open that up.
Alan, before you jump onto that, there was one other question that was in the chat that I'm not sure you saw, that from Jan Donald, who said, you said you were a fan of TikTok, Alan. What are the advantages for the heritage sector?
Of TikTok?
Yeah.
You know,
I mean,
it's used massively in China for heritage, but what are the advantages? It's the thing that people are looking at. You know, if you're wanting to connect with, new audiences and to make heritage relevant, and you know, there's loads of people who love heritage and who are really kind of into it, but the heritage is kind of like, to me, the fundamental thing about heritage is it's about passing things on from one generation to the next generation. You know, it's almost, well, it is in the definition. It's you know, it's not just history, understanding the past. It's also the process of passing on what we have or what we had on to future generations. And if the future generation is looking at TikTok, then I think heritage should be there, because you know, you have to speak people's language. You have to be where they are in order to communicate with them. And that's not to disrespect and that's not to say that, you know, everybody has to do TikTok, or to disrespect any of the other sort of heritage communication activities. But it's a thing that's popular. Lots of people are doing it, and it's a 30-second video. That's not such a bad format for giving people an introduction to a place or an introduction to an artifact, and you know, putting a bit of background music on it. I mean, a lot of the sea shanty stuff has kind of swept the world, partly on the back of TikTok, with people listening to traditional Scottish and traditional heritage songs as a result of that. So for all of those reasons, I think that you know, when I do my lectures or when I do my courses, I always try and get people, you know, at university, the students, to go off and research stuff and to come back and tell us about it, because that way you find out, you know, oh, what social media are people using, you know, and what activities, how are people communicating, you know, and I think that we should try and figure out what's happening. And it's not, I don't think it's a zero-sum game, you know, that if you can get, so just using TikTok as an example, but if we can get some sort of presence or interest in TikTok, then maybe people in the local village who are doing that because they're into communicating some sort of dance or pop song or some sort of weird thing, if they know the local museum is interested in using their TikTok skills, then maybe you get new people and new energy becomes involved in the heritage field and so on. So yeah, I don't want to sound evangelical about TikTok. It could be another technology, or it could be another thing. I'm just trying to think, you know, there's sort of yeah, there's lots of things that come and go, but I think we should kind of keep an eye on them and tap into them.
I think that's a really nice reflection, Alan. I also think in terms of Doors Open Days, especially since last year was the first year we went digital, so we found that we definitely have a new audience who have come to us through digital platforms only. They're not necessarily people who went to buildings and now are following us digitally. So we now have two audiences, and we're really aware that there's an audience who come to us through digital channels and who are maybe a younger audience as well, a younger demographic. So being able to reach those people. And one of the things that we're always banging on about is getting away from the word heritage as well. So it's talking about stories and places, and instead of, you know, talking about heritage. History is an okay word, but it seems to be that heritage is a turn-off for people. So actually stories and places is a really good way of sharing things through TikTok too.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Or YouTube. I mean, yeah. And I like stories and places, and yeah, using language that connects, I think is good and is an important thing. So Jan, were you skeptical? Are you convinced, or you just interested in what I thoughts on it were?
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Very clearly.
Hi, sorry. I was just staying completely anonymous for the whole thing, and I hadn't realised I was putting my answers on the chat.
I'm
yes.
sorry. I hope you don't mind me picking on you like that.
No, absolutely not. No, I'm a great believer in all these things, and I'm a trustee of Grome House, so I shall be taking that to our next meeting. And yes, I also answered your question on Ambala. So I had a lot to do with Ambala when it first came out, and I had a lot to do with Scran when it first came out. So yeah.
Wow, it sounds as though you're a mover and shaker.
It sounds as if I'm ancient, yes.
No,
yes,
I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that. No, not at all. Not at all. Okay. Yeah, no. Graham House is a great museum, and I spent quite a lot of time working with Joe Clements, who I think works with you as well on the Cine European project. Anyway, so that's great. Really pleased to meet you, Jan. Oh. Glad you came along. I'm glad everybody came along. There's nothing worse than doing a talk nobody comes to. Well, yeah, okay. So should we talk? Are there any more questions? It'd be great if there are anything people want to throw up. Which is super.
I've got a question, please.
Oh yeah, great.
It's for the buildings. Was it a high F number was recommended, or a low F number to photograph?
A high F number will give you a better depth of field, so you'll get more in focus. But
Thank you very much.
But you need to make sure that you have a tripod if you're using a high F number, because you'll need to have your exposure will be for a longer period of time, so you need to keep it steady.
Yes.
Thank you. Don't go completely. I mean, so often your range will be between about 2 and 22. So I would head for about between 11 and 16, a high number, but not the highest. When it's really small, you start to get distortions in the image. They call it chromatic aberration. But essentially you start to get prism effects on the edges of things. So but yeah, about 15 or 16, 11, 16, something like that is generally a good place to be. Yeah, thanks for the question. That was great to get that question. And so,
thank you, Mr. Miller.
It's fine. It's a pleasure. And so then, but once we've got a photograph, there are things that we can do with it. And I would suggest that GIMP, GNU image manipulation program is a good thing for doing post-processing. Now, if a lot of you may have other programs that you use, and they pretty much work in the same way. So I think Photoshop is probably I can say industry standard. It's probably the most popular commercial piece of software that people who are serious about photography would use. But I think that GIMP has advantages in that it's free, it's cross-platform, so you can use it on Mac or Linux or Windows. And yeah, it's fully functional. It's got pretty much everything that you would want to do, and it means that, but it does the same sort of things. It does the same sort of things as Photoshop does. Photoshop will probably do more and try to do more for you. But you could just go, just search for GIMP and download it and install it as you would install any other piece of software. You say there, it says download 2.1.0, and it's good. And why would we want to do this? Well, this is a photograph of Edinburgh Castle. It's 24 megapixels in size. It's a JPEG, so that's a sort of compression. It's 14.5 megabytes. It's by Ross Fontaine, and the file is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike 4 International License, which means that I can use it, provided I give attribution, which I've done to Ross Fontaine. So it's a photograph someone else has used and I can use it. Okay, so so what would we want to do with this? Well, the first thing we might want to do is to change its size. Okay, so 6,000 by 4,000 pixels is a pretty standard size, 24 megapixel camera. If I want to make a poster with it, I might want to use all of those pixels. But if I want to zoom in and just use a part of it, then that might be useful. But my screen, the screen that I've got here is, well, it's not, but the screen that most people have is 1920 by 1080. So it's 2000 by 1000. And so if most people have got screens of that size, there's not a lot of point of putting a photograph that is 6,000 by 4,000 into a web page or onto social media. In fact, it's counterproductive because the more pixels you have, the longer it is going to take to download. So I would say that whenever putting an image onto the web or into social media, it is worth thinking about what its size is, because it's going to, resizing it is going to make it, often is going to make it more usable and more useful. And so we can do this in using GIMP by simply uploading the photograph. There's a link here which shows you how to change the image size, I think. Yeah, so it's got a whole set of instructions for doing that. But I can just talk through briefly. So if you choose the image menu and choose scale image, then you get this dialog box. Okay, and you see there it says width 6,000 and height 4,000. Okay, so you just, what I would do is I just type in here 2,000. Okay, and then click on scale. Okay, and that will change the number of pixels in your image. And I would then choose export or save as to create a new image to the new scale or the new number of pixels. And now I've got something which will take up the whole of a high definition screen with 1 pixel per thing, so that's fine. But it can also be squeezed into something smaller. Often you might want to make images even smaller, so like 1,000 by 500 or something like that. So this is a straightforward process that is going to make your images that you upload onto the web more accessible to people. People are going to have to wait around, less time for them to download. But you don't want to mess up the original. You want to keep the original 6,000 by 4,000. Like I say, that will be useful to you if you're wanting to print a large poster from it, and it may be useful to you if you want to create a image of a different resolution from the one that you've just created. What you don't want to do when messing about with images is to take an image, do a transformation on it, then the new image, save that, and then do a transformation on the new image. Every time you make these changes, every time you do these operations, you lose a tiny bit of quality. Okay, so you want to keep your original image kind of like back there in an archive, so that every time you want to make something new, you can go back to that, the pristine original one, and do your transformations to get the image that you want out of it. Okay, so if the original image may be too small for specific use, which it will normally be if you've taken it using default settings on a phone or on a camera, it's a good idea to take a photograph at as high a resolution as possible. But then you want to do the transformation on it to make it into a usable resolution. This, of course, is all, you know, if you can be bothered, or if it's worthwhile investing the time to do this. If you know that you're doing photographs for a web page, then you can set your camera or you can set your phone to make them at an appropriate resolution for the use that you want. Okay, but if you're making a set of resources for reuse, take them at the highest possible quality level and then take copies and do transformations on them. So does that make sense? So that's the first thing we can do with GIMP, or pretty much any other image manipulation program such as Photoshop. The second thing that we can do is we can change the size of a JPEG. And what I mean by that is we can keep the number of pixels the same and change the size by messing with the quality. Okay, so when we save an image, which may be in a RAW format or some other format, we save it as a JPEG. That's going to introduce compression, which will reduce the size. But also, even if we have a JPEG, often it will save it at 90% or 90%. It will save it at a high quality resolution. And if we're wanting to use this on the web or something like that, we can dial down the quality setting on JPEG. So we dial it down to, say, 80 from 100. That's going to reduce the size from 15.4 megabytes to 3.8 megabytes. When is this useful? Well, it's useful when we're wanting to put stuff on the web. It's often really useful if we're wanting to send somebody an image via email, because a lot of email systems will go, well, I'm not going to handle anything above 8 megabytes, or I'm not going to handle anything above 10 megabytes or 20 megabytes. So we can load the image into GIMP, and we can then dial back the quality from 100 to 80, and suddenly we've got an image that's 3.8 megabytes that we can email, whereas before we can't. And in fact, I'm doing that with a bunch of images for a report I have to do. They won't accept images above 2 megabytes in size to be uploaded. So I can create these images and then I can just use this to change the size. Okay, so reduce the file size without changing resolution, increase the level of compression, choose export from the final file menu, reduce the quality, and boom, there we go. Okay, and then the third is cropping an image. So choosing the crop tool, you can choose to crop from images, transform tools, crop, and that lets us select a part of the image that we want to do. Left click and drag, adjust the selection, press enter, and then we've created an image from a part of the photograph that we've taken. So that was all like from the assumption that what we're doing, what we're doing is taking a photograph. We're taking a photograph and we're putting it into an image manipulation program, and we're doing some manipulations on it to make it more usable. But most of the time, the way I create images is through screen capture. So I just press Alt and print screen. I press Alt and print screen. If I fire up GIMP, then I can choose create from clipboard, and that will create an image from my screen, and that I can then crop or select from that image in order to put it into a report or use it in some way. So of great value, GIMP. I'm sure people will have other ways of achieving all of these things, and some of which may be more efficient for your workflow. So don't. And then the final thing that just look at is the correcting perspective. So all you need to do is open the image in GIMP and use the perspective tool. There's a set of instructions here linked from the presentation. How to correct photo perspective distortion with GIMP from Livewire, and you can just follow this through and you'll get your vertical perspectives all sorted out for you. Okay, so there you go. And I'll just pause there because it's a big topic, and I haven't touched on a whole bunch of things like color correction and making things pop and all of those sorts of things. So you can, with great benefit, spend a large portion of your life working on this, creating great images. But I would sustain that if you've taken a photograph using good light perspective and you put it into GIMP and manipulate it so that you can put it on the web page, you've done a great job there. So yeah.
Can I just jump in just for a second?
Yeah, please do.
I mean, yeah, I've used GIMP as well, Alan. The Photos app that comes with Windows 10, well, apart from the perspective tool, you can do all these other things, and that's something that, you know, everybody who's using Windows will already have on their computer. So if they don't want to get involved in downloading stuff and, you know, all the kind of potential intricacies of GIMP, they could just use those tools within the Photos app. I've found it really useful.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure that's good, and I think somebody will be able to say the same thing about Mac. I mean, the one advantage GIMP has over those is that, you know, if there's a bunch of you who are working together, and, you know, some people favor one type of system and some people favor another type of system, GIMP will work on all of them. But yeah, the Windows Photo app is I'm sure it is great. And then if you want to go a step further, then you can get this Photoshop as well. But yeah, I think that. Okay, thanks a lot for that, Neil.
Rebecca has also just shared a link to another free online photo manipulation software called Photopea, I think it is. She's put the link in the chat. So if anyone else has used that, or if anyone wants to investigate that, that's there as well.
Oh, thanks for putting GIMP into the chat console. That's great. Yeah, I don't really know about photop.com. That's great. Oh, so it's a free online. It's a free online one, so you don't even have to download it. You can just work. You can work on it, and it's compatible with Adobe Photoshop, GIMP, SketchUp. I've not heard of. Yeah, Corel Draw is another one. Oh, that's very interesting. Thanks a lot, Rebecca. Have you got experience in using this?
Yeah, I've used it a lot before. Our organisation actually has Photoshop now, but before that, when we didn't, it was just a really simple way to manipulate images and sort of correct some of the things you were talking about if you hadn't managed to get it when you were originally taking the photo. So I found it quite simple to use. It's even simpler than Photoshop, to be honest. So anyone sort of intimidated by that, it's sort of a cross between Paint and a basic photo editor and Photoshop, really. So yeah, I would recommend it. It's quite simple to use.
That's nice. And I see their CSS, so it looks as though it's kind of quite web friendly
yes.
as well. Lovely.
Alan, could I just ask, so when I worked for Ambala, that was history and culture. And when I worked for Scran, that was history and culture. I've also worked for a childcare organisation. And at that point, I decided to start removing metadata from pictures. What's your take on that? You know, just from a privacy point of view. It's just in Photoshop, it's dead easy. You just save for web, and that's, you know, and you choose no metadata. So that scraps all the metadata. So nothing is uploaded with the photo. But would you bother with that sort of thing or not?
I think that it's privacy issues are very important to be concerned about, but I think that it's particularly important where you're talking about people who feature in photographs, and also particularly important when you talk about children who feature in photographs. And so that, I mean, the first thing I think is to make sure that anybody who is to think much more carefully when you have human subjects in the photograph, and make sure that you have consent, and make sure that you have some written form of consent, particularly if the person is discernible. Yeah, that in terms of kind of like routinely removing metadata from photographs, I suppose you're worried about sort of location and times, and that people know where you are, and that sort of thing. So yeah, I can't see why that would be a bad thing to do. I mean, the only thing is that there is metadata, such as describing the type of lens that is being used, or possibly the location that you've taken a photograph from, and the orientation of the photograph that may be of some use. I mean, so for example, the lens thing. So I suppose my suggestion would be that it's a good idea to archive a copy which has full which maintains the full metadata, and then if you are going to publish something or put something onto the web, check the metadata or clean the metadata as part of your workflow. And I can see that when you're working for a charity which is particularly concerned with children, that would become something that was really central to what you were doing. If you've got a set of photographs, you know, of a castle in which people aren't particularly important, then maybe it's not quite so significant.
Okay, thank you.
Does they're just.
Yes, I'm just picking your brains because you're here.
They're my thoughts on it. It's good to get my brains picked, but I hadn't really thought so much about the security issues with metadata. So with photographs, so it's a really good thing to get raised and thought about. So thank you for that. Great.
Just as a follow-up from that, Alan, I was just thinking about alt text in images as well. Do you have anything that you want to share about that? Because I know that sometimes it's about accessibility, and it's really useful to be able to attach the alt text to your images, so that if people with visual issues cannot necessarily see your images, or whether it doesn't come up properly on a screen, that people still know what they're looking at.
Yeah, I think that's good to do that. I think that whenever you put an image onto a web page, it's a really good idea to have, it's best practice to have alt text associated with it. And more widely than that, I think that whenever we have an image, it's a good idea to associate metadata with it. And by this, I don't necessarily mean, I don't mean the metadata that we've just scrapped, right? But I mean, like, give each image a title, you know, because when it comes out of the camera, it has, you know, it comes out as DSC 00972583, right? But collecting, you know, everything that was taken on the same day, putting it into a folder and giving it a name, or even having a spreadsheet and, you know, file name and then title, just adds so much, because you suddenly provided some context to the photograph. You know, if I'm looking at a photograph, if you know, if I'm sat next to somebody and they show me a photograph, you know, what I want to hear, oh, this was taken on holiday on a beach in Spain 3 years ago. You know, then suddenly the photograph just means so much more than just a photograph of a beach. You know, I suddenly know that some, and so I think that those few words to give it a title. And I mean, we've spent a lot of time over the last few years working in projects, creating systems that will help do that, so that you can upload a photograph, type in some stuff, a title, a description, click on a map to say where it's from, add in a date and upload it, and then you've associated some metadata with the photograph, which will provide, you know, context for the photograph, and therefore enhance it and provide a lot more meaning, for it. So I think that I know I've travelled some way from the question because I've forgotten what the question is, which is terrible, because I've given the answer to a question I can't remember. Did that answer it?
I think so, yeah. We were talking about alt text and metadata.
Oh, alt text, that's it. Oh.
And you've gone on to about labeling and naming images, which I think is really crucial and key, especially when you've got loads and you, like you say, you download them and then you go back to them or you share them with other people. I think we're always asking when people submit an image for Doors Open Days to go with their event. So maybe if it's something to upload onto the website, we want to know the name of the photographer, the name of the image, where it was, and we want to have a bit of context around it. So the name of the venue as well is also really useful, and confirming as well what you were saying earlier, Alan, which is making sure that you have the permission of anyone in the image. And sometimes if it's an event, that's more about people signing in when they come in and having notes on the wall, making people aware that they're having their pictures taken.
Yeah, I think that's all That's all really, really, really important. Otherwise, you just end up with photographs that you don't, that could be, the photograph itself could be a masterpiece. But if you don't know what it's of, and you don't know whether the person in it is okay with it being used, then it can't really be used. I mean, it may end up being the subject to some archaeologist in 50 years' time trying to track down what that photograph is of. But yeah, okay, that's great. Do that. And oh yeah, so we talked about the GIMP thing. So this is there is this kind of map that we've made, which has got photographs and virtual tours on it for digital tours events. And in order to do that, we've got a sort of archive system. And if anybody wanted to upload photographs into that archive system, I think that would be a really great thing to do. So, God, am I allowed to set homework? I know it's kind of like an awful thing, but what would be really great is if between now and next week, if you're coming along next week, some of you or all of you would take a photograph of a piece of heritage and bring it along. Because what I'd like to do is I'd like to make with your consent, we'd like to make a gallery of photographs of heritage from people that have been part of this course. And as we go on, we hope that it will kind of like develop into offerings that can be used as part of the digital open doors thing. But if there's 40 of you here, there's 40 people come along next week, all with a photograph, then we could make a nice gallery of all of the different pieces of heritage that you're kind of like involved in. And somebody said something about, if you listen, then, but if you actually do, then that's the point at which you kind of get sort of understanding. So I think that it would be, and also it would be great from my perspective, because what I would get to see the heritage that you are all interested in. So it would be a sort of, so what do you reckon?
I think it's a great idea. And I also, I'd like to just add to that, that it would be really interesting to see how people are translating heritage when it's intangible heritage, because I think sometimes that's a question of tangible. If it's a building or something that you can get your hands on, that's quite straightforward to translate that into an image. Whereas how do you capture intangible heritage in an image? So that would be a really nice resource to kind of develop and think about.
Yes. And I'm sorry, when people say intangible heritage, I immediately think about food. and cooking and crafts and stuff like that. But
well, there's a lot of that as well that we're really keen to kind of develop as part of Doors Open Days, because it's not just about, the buildings are half the story, the people are the other half, and the people are the stories and the food and the dance and the language and all of that. So being able to capture that in image is really important and really hard as well.
Yes. Okay. So I mean, if you were, then you would be welcome to use this. I mean, you'd be welcome to just come along next week with your photographs and stick them into the chat. That would work. Or you could also you could use this archive system. You're welcome to upload a photograph, because if you do that, then we've got this kind of like thing whereby you can create a place, but the main thing is with the media. So you can drop a media file on here and then give it a title, give it a description, and then there's these things. Choose a license, put in who made it, that sort of thing, and associate these sort of things with the.
I think some people might have brought photos along with them today, because I know that as part of the invite to the session, people were asked to bring something. So whether people might want to start doing that already, I don't know if anyone did bring an image. So I might be just talking to an empty room, as it were. But if anyone did, maybe you could give us a little smiley emoji.
How are we doing for time? Okay, so this is here. So that URL is, that URL is Ian, could you pop the URL? Oh, more. There we go. Chat. Oh, chat that. There you go. So this is a URL for this, this here is a map which shows lots of virtual tours that are associated with the Digital Doors Open in previous, and there's some galleries waiting for content, but the archive is here. So what you need to do then in order to upload something and associate metadata is to log in. In order to log in, you go to the registration page. So I create a name, new user, and I put in my email address. Countries, United Kingdom. So I can select an organization. There's lots and lots of organizations here. What's the one we should select, Ian?
University of St Andrews, which was just there at the bottom.
Okay, so I think we need to make one for the course, though.
Sorry, you're right. Yes, you should select that. We'll make one for the course.
So okay, so what are we going to call it? We call it we'll just call it workshops. Okay. If anybody wants us to create an organization for them, then that's fine. We'll do that. But at the moment, we'll just have a organize it. I'm just putting in a password. Okay. So now if I just log in, I think I have logged in. So you only have to do that once. Once you've done that, that's fine. So we then got an upload form, and we're going to go upload media. Okay. And then give it a title. Drop a file on here. Give it a description. And then you can give it a place. And whether it's public for members only or private, you can choose a license. So I'll make it public domain, but you can reserve rights or have different sorts of licenses. Select a format, JPEG, whatever the format happens to be, and that's about it. Okay, that's all that's needed. And the thing is that if we have a few of those, then what next week is we can then go and have a look at creating a gallery for them. And so, but the key thing here is that we can save it as full resolution, we can have a description, and we can have a title for it. So if any of you fancy doing that, then we'll send round the spreadsheet, not the spreadsheet. We'll send round the PowerPoint with the instructions on it. Okay, does anyone want to ask anything from me about that? Okay. My email, by the way, is my email in. So if you have any images that you would like me to add to this, then that would be cool. That would be cool too. Okay.
I'm using an Apple computer, so I don't know whether or not you're using a Windows computer and it's incompatible or incompatible.
I am using a Windows computer, but these are all web forms, so that they should work just as well in Windows or with a Mac. And if they don't, then we're happy to try and fix it so that they do if you have any issues. But Mac and Windows should both be fine.
Thank you. What was your email, Mr. Miller? ahr1@st-andrews.ac.uk. I didn't catch it, but you can continue.
It's in the chat. Okay. AHR1. Okay, Mina, thanks a lot for coming along. We did say we'd be finished at 3:30, so we're about to finish.
Thank you.
So that's great. So I did want to say something. I seem to have lost it in the, but I did want to say something about Creative Commons. But we can maybe talk about that next week. There's lots of online resources that are available, but when we're taking photographs and when we're using photographs, it's important to have some thought about the intellectual property ramifications. And the way it works is this: is that when you take a photograph, when you create something, intellectual property is also created, and that belongs to the person who takes the photograph. Okay, so this is important for museums and the like to understand. So if you employ someone to come round and to take photographs, then the photographs will belong to them, unless you get them to sign a contract saying that the photographs, but you agree, they agree that the photographs will belong to you. Okay. But often it's a great idea to be able to share stuff. So there's lots of public domain resources. And Creative Commons provides a set of licenses which enable you to share things whilst having some protection of your intellectual property. Sorry, and over on the left-hand side here, it shows the different licenses that Creative Commons offer. And you see that this is an example of a Creative Commons license. and there's a whole range of different licenses. The most common used one is Creative Commons by attribution and share alike, which I can recommend for use. So by attribution, Creative Commons by attribution means that people are allowed to use it pretty much for any purpose that they want to do so, but they have to say where it came from. Okay, so that's Creative Commons by attribution. And the share alike means that they need to share it under the same conditions. Okay, and that is quite a nice license because it means that people can't then sell it for huge amounts of money. You get the credit for it, whether that's a person or an organization, but also it gets to be shared by people, by large numbers of people. So that's a good, I think, approach for licensing. Does anyone want to say anything about public domain and intellectual property? I'm kind of a bit surprised that my slides have disappeared on that.
I could say about intellectual property. I tried to get a patent in intellectual property and it took years and years and years and I got nowhere and spent a fortune. Yeah.
So if you want to make if you want to create a patent, it does cost money, but I don't think that it's necessary in this context. No. A patent will provide you with protection. What it does is it stops, if you've invented something, it stops somebody copying that invention and making money out of it. Okay, and you need to apply for it. But for intellectual property, for copyright, you don't need to apply for it. You don't need to pay anything for it. It is something that happens automatically. When you create something, you automatically get the intellectual property rights to that, so that nobody else can use it without your permission or without your support. Okay.
Alan, Fiona Spowart has put a message on the chat as well, just about this as well. I can read it out. Can you describe best practice when looking to use photos other people have taken of your workplace on social media? Is it enough to put something like, please use hashtag your work's name to give us permission to repost your photos and credit them in the post? Should you always message them to say you've used the photo afterwards?
If somebody else has taken a photograph of your workplace, unless they have signed a contract or a disclaimer transferring the rights to you or to your workplace, then they own the copyright of them. If they own the copyright of something, then you should only use that with their explicit permission, or if they have explicitly put a license onto the thing which and empowers you to do that. So if they put it into the public domain, or if they attach a Creative Commons license to it, then you can use it under the terms of the license. But if they haven't, then you shouldn't really use it. I think it gets a bit grey area when what you're doing is you're linking to things and you're sharing things that belong to somebody else. But certainly, you know, copying something and then uploading it and then sharing it is not something that you should do unless it's got appropriate licensings which enable you to do that. And you should be a little bit careful because there are some people whose business model is to put photographs out there and then sue people who use them and to go to court on it. So most of the time people are reasonable. And also, if you're putting something up, you should always have some sort of disclaimer like, we've done everything we can to comply with licensing. However, if you find some discrepancy, please let us know, and we'll take down and address your concerns immediately, so that you show that you're trying to be reasonable rather than anything else. Does that kind of, I'm not sure if that's exactly what you're asking, Fiona. Yeah, CH, thanks for that. Oh, Fiona, your mic doesn't work. Never mind.
There's also Colin Cooper was wanting to say something, and I think maybe it's a long response. Colin, do you want to?
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. Thanks for taking my hand. It was just to say that it might be a useful tool if Photoshop was getting mentioned. There are other availables, but you can actually put quite a simple. There's a tick box. I can't demonstrate it without sharing the screen and whatnot, but you can put a wee copyright symbol, and there's a keyboard shortcut to make it available as a text. So you can put that in the metadata along with your name and the date that the image was taken. So that's kind of burning the copyright, if that was a thing that you were wanting to enforce, onto your image into the metadata. The more traditional term, the more traditional way was by putting a watermark. So for example, the copyright symbol, the C within a circle, followed by the year it was taken, and then your establishments or your name on it, kind of superimposed on top as letters on top of the image. But that's controversial because people think that can distract from the image, but it's the easiest way to let people know that there are restrictions on it, and without mentioning names, newspapers like to find all these images and that don't have any form of copyright indicator on it, metadata or otherwise, and make use of that opportunity. So it's just a tip for anyone who's concerned over that.
Thanks a lot for that. Yeah, I mean, I suppose the thing is that if you're wanting to protect the copyright that you have, that's a good thing. That's a good tip to take. You can burn copyright in different ways. I mean, a lot of the time when we're kind of like in the heritage sector, or when we're kind of like with museums, we're wanting to find ways of sharing stuff without being ripped off about it. And in that context, I put in a thing there to Creative Commons. So that's got a whole explanation there of Creative Commons and public domain stuff that we can refer to later on. And also, of course, there are a lot of good public domain resources that we can make use of. Fiona, it's just that I've seen that some other organizations use that approach, putting the hashtag in there into the bio, etc. So I wondered if that was the approach where you were talking, but it seems as though we should always be messaging for permission before using photos, rather than trying to think of ways to make the process quicker. So thanks for clearing that up, Alan. Yeah, I think that kind of linking. Well, so here's what I think. I think the first thing is that whenever you use an image, whatever its status, whether it's public domain, copyright, and you've got permission, or Creative Commons, you should always do clear attribution. Okay, so you should say who made the image, provide a link to their web page, and preferably provide a link to the original source. That in itself shows goodwill. So I think that's a good thing to do. But yes, I would have to say that whenever you're using an image, you need to check what its status is. And if it isn't in the public domain, or if it hasn't got an explicit Creative Commons sharing license, then copyright will be reserved, and so you shouldn't use that. You shouldn't use that image, or even a cut down image. Yeah, I think that's right. I have to leave now. Okay, well, we're 4 minutes past the time that we said, so we've been at this for 2.5 hours. So I think that it'll be fine. For, anybody wants to leave. and I think maybe we should be wrapping up the session. And I'm really hoping that you'll come along. You'll all come along next week to it, and really happy to receive any feedback. I think that, Catherine, did you want to say something about feedback?
Well, I know Nicola might have something more about it, just that there is a form, and I don't know, I think it's being sent out after this ends. I think you'll get an email through Eventbrite with a Google form.
Yeah, it'll be emailed afterwards to all participants. So we're going to do a follow-up for each session, and then we'll do we potentially might do one right at the end. So watch out, and please fill in the feedback and let us know your comments.
Yeah, that'd be fabulous. Thank you.
So yeah, thanks a lot for everyone for coming along.
Well, thank you. Can I thank you, Alan, as well, because that was a long time to be talking. So that's great, and I think your presentation has been great, and everybody's looking forward to receiving that. So we'll email that out following this, probably along with, well, separately from the evaluation, because that'll come through the other channels. But hopefully see everybody at the next sessions.
Yeah.
Nice thanks in the chat.
Yeah, thanks a lot, everybody, for thanks. Good. Yeah, and it was good to hear about and see some of the projects that you guys have been involved with before, and really interested to hear about more of them. Godsall and Catherine, do you want to go to a green room or just a debrief briefly? Or
cool.
Yeah. So I think maybe we just hang on. Hey, how you doing? I'm now in 2 meetings.
The Google ping is still being recorded, so